On the edge of Washington state, the Pacific Ocean does not just crash against the shore. It eliminates ships whole. This windswept headland carries a name no sailor wants to hear: Cape Disappointment. But Cape Disappointment is not famous for its name. It is infamous for what vanished here. In 1856, the United States government raised a lighthouse on this cape to save lives. Instead, the lighthouse became the centerpiece of one of America's strangest, most overlooked vanishing cases. Historians compare it to Scotland's legendary Flannan Isles mystery, where 3 keepers disappeared without a trace. Tonight, we step inside the American twin of that nightmare. A story of isolation, of a missing keeper's wife, and a structure locals now call cursed. Welcome to the dark history of Cape Disappointment. Long before the lighthouse existed, this headland was already a graveyard. Sailors nicknamed the surrounding waters the Graveyard of the Pacific. More than 2,000 ships have wrecked along this coastline since record-keeping began. The Columbia River collides with the open ocean here, creating some of the most violent currents on Earth. Fog rolls in without warning. Waves can swallow a fishing vessel in seconds. It was into this chaos that the Cape Disappointment Lighthouse was built in 1856. The lighthouse became the oldest operating beacon on the entire West Coast. A massive Fresnel lens, built in France decades earlier, was shipped around the world to power its light. But even with the lighthouse standing, ships kept vanishing into the rocks below. The lighthouse alone was not enough. The Cape demanded a second sentinel. In 1898, a new lighthouse rose 2 miles north. It was named North Head. North Head Lighthouse was constructed specifically because ships approaching from the north could not see the original beacon. Keepers were assigned to North Head almost immediately after construction finished. Among them was a man named Alexander Pesonen, a Finnish immigrant who had crossed an ocean to tend an American light. Alexander brought his wife, Mary Pesonen, to live with him at this remote station. The new home sat on the second windiest lighthouse location in the entire United States. The wind at North Head does not simply blow. It howls without pause, day and night, 4 months at a time. For nearly 25 years, Mary Pesonen helped her husband maintain the light, the oil, the lens, the endless machinery of the lighthouse. But isolation has a way of working into a person's mind, especially at a lighthouse this remote. There were no neighbors. No nearby town. Only the lighthouse, the keeper's house, and the relentless wind. Newspapers at the time would later describe Mary Pesonen's condition using a chilling phrase: temporary insanity. In 1923, after a quarter century at this lighthouse, something inside Mary Pesonen finally broke. Witnesses say she walked from the keeper's house toward the cliffside near the lighthouse. She approached the edge where the lighthouse grounds drop more than 200 feet toward the rocks. Mary Pesonen vanished over the cliff and was found below, her fall ending at the rocks where the ocean meets the lighthouse cape. The official report blamed exhaustion and isolation. But locals near the lighthouse have always told a different story. Some say the lighthouse itself changed Mary Pesonen long before that final day. Others claim the wind carried something into that keeper's house, something the lighthouse was never built to withstand. Alexander Pesonen retired from the lighthouse almost immediately after his wife's passing. He left the lighthouse, left North Head, and left the cape that had taken 25 years of his life. Records show Alexander Pesonen passed away just 1 year later, his health collapsing rapidly after he abandoned the lighthouse. To this day, staff and visitors report strange occurrences inside the old Pesonen keeper's house at North Head Lighthouse. Lights inside the lighthouse keeper's residence flicker without explanation. Doors that were locked are later found open. Objects inside the keeper's house move position overnight, despite no visitors having entered the building. Some guests staying overnight at the historic keeper's house report a presence walking the hallways near the lighthouse. They described footsteps echoing through the keeper's house at North Head Lighthouse, footsteps that match no living guest. Paranormal investigators who have visited the Cape Disappointment Lighthouse complex claim electromagnetic readings spiked near the peasant innkeeper's house. Could this simply be the wind, the wood, and an old building settling near the cliffs? Or is something at this lighthouse still trapped, still pacing the same floors it walked in 1923? Now compare this story to the infamous Flannan Owl's disappearance across the Atlantic Ocean. In December 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers vanished from a remote Scottish lighthouse without explanation. James Duckett, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur disappeared from the Flannan Owl's lighthouse, leaving behind an overturned chair and an unlit lamp. Investigators found beds unmade, a clock stopped, and oilskins still hanging by the door of that lighthouse. The 3 Flannan Owl's keepers were never found. Their disappearance remains unsolved over a century later. The Flannan Owl's case became the template for every isolated lighthouse mystery that followed it. Cape Disappointment and North Head Lighthouse share the same ingredients that made Flannan Owls infamous worldwide: extreme isolation, relentless wind, a remote keeper's house cut off from civilization for weeks at a time. And in both cases, a lighthouse swallowed someone whole, leaving only questions behind. The difference is that America's version of this story has been almost forgotten outside the Pacific Northwest. Why does Flannan Owls dominate documentaries worldwide while Cape Disappointment's lighthouse mystery stays buried in local folklore? Some researchers argue the difference is documentation. The Flannan Owls case had immediate government investigators on site. At Cape Disappointment, the Cape's remoteness meant Mary Peasant's passing was processed quietly, without the same international attention. Others suggest something stranger: that the Cape itself, true to its ominous name, disappoints those who try to study it too closely. Park records covering Cape Disappointment State Park have gone missing or remained incomplete for certain years during the early 20th century. Fishermen working these waters for generations describe a lighthouse that seems to attract more than ships toward the rocks. They speak of lights at North Head Lighthouse flickering in patterns no keeper could replicate using 19th century equipment. They speak of figures seen walking the cliffside trail near the lighthouse late at night, where no hiking trail official exists. Coast Guard personnel who later staffed the lighthouse after the Peasant family left reported their own unexplained encounters. One keeper allegedly requested a transfer away from North Head Lighthouse after repeated nights of hearing a woman's voice calling from the cliffs. Officially, wind noise traveling through the rocks explained that request. Unofficially, several Coast Guard logs from this lighthouse station remain sealed within Coast Guard historical archives. Why would routine weather reports from a small Pacific Northwest lighthouse need any form of restricted access decades later? That single unanswered question keeps amateur investigators returning to Cape Disappointment and North Head Lighthouse year after year. Skeptics insist there is a rational explanation buried somewhere within the Cape's documented history. They point to the second windiest classification of North Head Lighthouse as sufficient cause for any reported strangeness. Constant high-velocity wind can damage structures, create disorienting sounds, and erode a person's mental state over years of exposure. Isolation psychology researchers note that lighthouse keepers historically experienced disproportionately high rates of severe psychological distress. Before electricity reached remote lighthouses, keepers spent months without meaningful contact beyond their immediate family at the station. Under this theory, Mary Peasant's tragic passing becomes a documented consequence of extreme isolation, not the result of anything supernatural at all. But this rational explanation does not satisfy everyone who has stood inside that keeper's house at night. It does not explain the electromagnetic spikes recorded by multiple independent investigators inside the Peasant residence. It does not explain why staff members, decades apart and unaware of each other's reports, describe identical footstep patterns inside the same hallway. And it certainly does not explain why Cape Disappointment earned its name centuries before any lighthouse, any keeper, or any tragedy occurred here. Explorer John Mears named this cape in 1788 after failing to locate the mouth of the Columbia River from the open ocean. Mears believed the river did not exist. He sailed away disappointed, at Cape Disappointment. And remember, the Cape earned its name from disappointment long before tragedy ever touched its cliffs. The mystery of Cape Disappointment remains unsolved, unresolved, and unexplained, just 2 miles from a Flannan Isles of its very own. If America has a Flannan Isles, it stands right here, on this windswept cape, where the lighthouse still burns through the fog. Subscribe now, because the next case file we open may be sitting just beyond your own coastline.